going on, agents? I'm back with another build video, and today I have something a little different for you guys, actually. If you watched my last videos, you'll know I don't really post what's considered meta. I post these more obscure, unique, creative kind of builds. But if you are a more veteran player, just as a quick disclaimer, this build's not going to be so much like that. This is closer to your standard kind of meta or strongest build format that you're probably familiar with by now. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So if you're a more new player, you might not have seen this kind of thing. But yeah, if you are more experienced, there's not going to be anything too groundbreaking here. Other than the exception of the primary, actually, the primary weapon is very underused in my opinion. I think it's one of the most underrated weapons in the game. For me, it's up there with the MP7 as like one of the most underrated high-end weapons in the game. It's really, really strong and like nobody ever uses it or talks about it. So if you haven't given it a try, it's the Honey Badger, by the way. If you haven't tried it, I would definitely recommend it. You could just slot it in on any AR build you use, but if you don't have one, here's mine. It's primarily a damage build, so I have 3 armor cores, 3 weapon cores, but this is personal preference. You can go more armor if you want, or less armor if you want. That balance is up to you. But starting up top with the specialization, we're running the Technician. This is purely for the linked laser pointer. If you don't know what this does, it spots anybody that you aim at, and that's because we're using the flatline talent on our Honey Badger here, and then we're also using the spotter talent on our chest piece. So that's why we're using Technician there. I don't recommend using anything else because you need to activate those talents if you're using this format that I have here. So for the weapons here, like I said, we have the Honey Badger. We just want damage targets out of cover on that. And then Flatline to amplify our weapon damage to pulsed enemies. And then for the pieces here, we have one piece Uzina, one piece Brazos, one piece Seska, one piece Fenris, and one piece Grupo. For the mask here, it's our exotic Coyotes mask. Most of you probably know the deal with this one, but in case you're newer, essentially, if you're within 0 to 15 meters of an enemy, it's going to give you 25% crit damage. If you're within 15 to 25, which is that general mid-range area, you're going to get 10 crit damage, 10 crit chance. And if you're at 25 meters or further, you're going to get 25 crit chance. So just for reference here, if we go to our stats, I'm at 52 crit chance, 166 crit damage. So with the Coyotes in mind, that's pretty much always going to be maxed out at 60% crit chance. Unless we're in conflict, it's going to be closer to around 50. But that's where I like to be anyway. For our chest piece here, we just have the named closer chest piece. That's going to give us total armor for the brand bonus. We have crit chance, crit damage, and crit damage. And then that comes with perfect spotter, which amplifies our damage, again, by another 20% to pulsed enemies. For our holster here, we have the Picaro's holster. We got crit damage on that. For our knee pads, by the way, this just reminded me actually, I don't have this build perfectly optimized. There's a couple rolls here that are pretty high for the most part, but not completely optimized. So if you optimize everything, you might get a little bit of better numbers than what I have here. But we have crit damage, crit chance on that. The gloves here, we got our Fenris gloves with crit damage, crit chance. And then for our backpack, it's our Grupo backpack, crit chance, crit damage, and a crit damage mod. And we got the talent Vigilance on here. Now, something else to note is, if you're familiar with Vigilance, a lot of people don't prefer Vigilance just because they're not great for those head-on gunfights, because once you take damage, it's going to deactivate. So a lot of people might like to run something like Companion or any other damage talent you prefer, just so that it can stay active even while you're taking damage. For me, I like Vigilance with this just because, like I said, it's a damage first build. So I generally stay farther away and I'm more focused on just not taking head-on gunfights, but just putting shots downrange from farther away out of the line of sight. So I'm okay with Vigilance with this. Most of the time I keep it active just fine. But if you're more aggressive and you don't like Vigilance as much, you could definitely replace this with any other damage talent. For the skills, I'm just running the Decoy and the Scanner Pulse. Now, if you're running Conflict and you don't know, the Scanner Pulse has an increased cooldown for Conflict, and it's pretty long. So if you're playing Conflict, you could switch this out. I just run this in Conflict anyway, though. Now, something else worth noting with these builds, with these general kind of meta builds, they're not necessarily locked in on what you have to run. there's a lot of different ways you can get like really similar numbers without running these exact pieces. So like, for example, a lot of people, rather than running these Seska knee pads in the Grupo backpack, they would like to run like the Fox's Prayer. So you could do that, but I would definitely recommend at least having a piece of Seska. So if you want to run the Fox's Prayer, you could, and then I would just switch that backpack over to Seska instead of Grupo, especially if you're in conflict, just to make up for those lost watch stats. And then same thing for the gloves. You could run like something like Contractors. This is just the way it works for me. I prefer having higher crit stats, so I run both the brands that give you crit stat bonuses. But again, with these meta builds, like there's so many different ways you can mix and match different pieces and brands to get them to hit pretty much for the same amount of damage. Now, something else I'm just now realizing as I'm recording this here, you'll see I just switched to the Eagle Bearer for my secondary. You don't necessarily have to run the Eagle Bearer specifically, but I would recommend running some sort of AR that doesn't rely on that flatline talent, because you will occasionally run into some people running pulse resistance on their build, and that can cause you problems activating flatline and spotter. Now, if that happens, you're still going to do decent damage because that vigilance talent or whatever damage talent you're running here. So it's not a huge deal. You don't have to necessarily switch your build like some people might do with these spotter builds. If you have a secondary that can put out good damage without flatline. So I like the Eagle Bear here, but you could also run, like you'll see my secondary before was this Carbine 7 with Measured. That could be pretty good. But you can run any other high-end AR with any other damage talent that doesn't rely on spotting people, or any exotic AR of your choice. Another good option here would be the St. Elmo's Engine. But yeah, I'm going to run the Eagle Bear there. I just wanted to mention that real quick.